Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. This is episode 319. I'm your host, Winnie Pooh, and I am joined by my co-host, Stacy. That is at StacyPen89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this Monday afternoon?
Doing pretty well. It's a nice release from the heat. I don't know about where you're at, but it was brutal last week. It's been a couple of decent days.
Yeah. Last week was brutal. Sunday was good, or yesterday was good. I should say today was good too. So, hopefully, we get more of the good weather and less of the extreme heat where you can't step outside of your house weather. Um, but before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strick.land on Instagram, posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has merchandise available on our website. Check that out. That is on our website. You can find anything you would like on there: t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, even water bottles. You name it, we got it. Again, check that out on our website. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where, if you are currently watching this, it's on YouTube. And if you have not done so already, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has a Patreon which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland mailbag, hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, aka the Doug Bag, alongside Dallas Amico. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There is a $9 tier that gets you access to Sick and Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits like listening on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. And this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without Bet Online, which is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and match reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. And again, this is the downtime in the off season, but let's get started. There was one major, not major, I guess, but there was one interesting piece of reporting that came out last week from the very, very well regarded and very well liked by certainly myself, and I would say by most people, friend of the pod, Stefan Bondi of the Daily News. He's not a friend of the pod, by the way. It's a total joke. He probably hates us. I definitely don't like him. Um, he reported that Josh Hart will be signing an extension, 4 years, 75 million. Whenever he becomes eligible for that, which I believe is, I know it's in August. I want to say August 9th. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, 4 years, 75 million is what he is reporting is the likely number for that extension. Then he also reported that Immanuel Quickley is looking for a bit more than that number, which makes sense to me anyway. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't know, that's really the only fucking actual news we got this past week.
Do you think Dylan Brooks is on a fair contract?
um, I think if Dylan Brooks was named fucking Steve McDonald,
Frank
and
Ntilikina.
yeah, and he wasn't a raging asshole, everybody would think that contract is fine, even with his extreme inefficiency as a scorer. He's a really, really impactful defender. I think he was pretty much always in Memphis's best lineups, at least in terms of like net rating and all that type of shit. So is that a fair contract? No, but that's not just about him as a player, right? So like it's probably fine in terms of just basketball. When you factor in the other stuff, it's a little more complicated.
Do you think Josh Hart is better at basketball than Dylan Brooks?
Mm, I think I enjoy watching him play basketball more.
Because a lot of the impact stats, I don't think Hart blows you away as an on-ball defender, but like a lot of I think they have a good mix of on-ball guys like Grimes. McBride doesn't play a lot, but he's in that boat. Even RJ is a very good on-ball defender. With a couple of these guys, Quick and Hart is kind of in the same mold as Quickley, as someone who is very impactful off ball and on the glass in a way that kind of maybe shortchanges or overshadows the fact that just based on eye tests, you might see, on ball, it doesn't pop as much as like a lockdown. I'm going to take your best player and take him out of the games type of thing. So to me, it's like if Josh Hart is getting 4 for 75 in a world where Isaiah Stewart's getting 4 for 64, Dylan Brooks getting 4 for 80, like contracts are going up, the cap is going up. I don't think that's a bad deal. You see how impactful he is. And people talk about the shooting. If you don't pair him with another wing who can't shoot, like he can hit open corner threes. He probably should shoot them a little bit more than he does, and he's not a great shooter by any means. But he is reliable. It's like a weird in between guys who are just straight up liabilities. People are going to leave him open, but I don't think he's going to shoot 60% from three again. But over the last few seasons, he's on low volume, but on enough volume where he has those opportunities. On a team that is going to get him those opportunities with rim pressure guys like Brunson, like Randle, like RJ, like Quickley. I don't think that's a bad contract at all. And I don't think the fact that Quickley wants more is necessarily a bad thing either. We can get into Quickley afterwards, but on the Hart thing, do you think this is an overpay? And if you take it in totality, the fact that they did give up their first round pick this year, after they already traded a first for Cam to get that, in totality, do you still look at this as a good move for the Knicks? And understanding sunk costs maybe not worth talking about, but curious about your overall take on the Josh Hart, his involvement with the Knicks up to now.
Yeah, I think the contract is fine. My only reservation on it has really I think he's probably worth the number in a vacuum, especially given where the salary cap is projected to be going. Again, all the reporting is that you're looking at a cap environment where the expectation is it jumps 10% year on year. So, in that context, I don't think the number is a huge problem. I just wonder, and there's no way to know this stuff. I mean, I just don't know what team was going to offer more or similar to that. And so it's one of those things where it's were you negotiating against yourself? Who's going to come in? I know that's not exactly how any of this works. So I don't know. It's also kind of stupid. It's it would make me a little bit happier if it was 467 instead of 475 or something. But what does that really fucking mean in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. Probably not that much. So 475, honestly, it's a solid deal. I think he's worth the money. He doesn't really need to do anything other than just keep playing the way he plays. Obviously, if he would be a little bit more willing as a 3-point shooter, that'd be nice, but it's not. I think that's more of a playoff concern than it is a regular season issue. And
even, what did he shoot in the playoffs? I don't think his percentage was bad. It was more.
It's the volume. It's the volume.
When he played with RJ, it was especially noticeable. But if you play them at the 3 and 4 together, I don't think that's that much of an issue either.
Yeah, we'll see. It's obviously better.
He shot 31% from 3 in the playoffs on 3 attempts per game, so not great, but not disastrous.
Yeah, I don't really care about the number. It's just about the actual spacing that he provides. Yeah. It's at the 3, he's not going to be a good spacer. If he plays at the 4, or him and RJ play at the 3 and the 4, it's a little bit. You probably work around that a lot easier than you can if you're playing them at the 2 and 3.
And I do think if you play him with the 3, but it's Brunson and Grimes, or Quickley and Grimes, the 1 and 2, I also think that's less. Especially Randle can shoot now, right? He has the volume and gravity, I think. So I think that is also. It's just I think when you play those two together, the 2 and 3, as you mentioned, that's the only time I think it's really been problematic.
Yeah. So I'm fine with this number. I think it's a fine deal. I don't think this isn't one of those contracts. I don't anticipate it being like, oh my God, what a steal. But it's a fine contract. You
It'll
basically
be
have,
movable. I mean, he's what 20? He's 28. So
yeah, you have to pay solid wings around this number. So I mean, just for some comparison, like this 475 is roughly the kind of money you're talking about, like Alan Crabb and fucking Kent Bazemore and guys like that were getting
Tim
in
Hardaway
2016.
Jr.
Right. So is Josh Hart worth that contract in 2023 going into a new cap environment? Probably. Yeah, I think so. And then you also factor in he opted into the final year of his deal. So it's effectively a 5-year, $88 million contract. We'll see how they would structure the cap hits and all that type of thing, but it shouldn't be.
I mean, we want it to be descending, right?
Yeah, you would ideally want it to be descending, but if it's flat or if it's ascending, it's fine. It's not going to kill you either way. It's not a cost prohibitive contract. So
do you think it makes it tougher to evaluate him because he is he's a wing, but he isn't like your kind of the package that you see, like the guys you mentioned, and most wings I think are usually either really good 3-point shooters and mediocre defenders, or really good defenders who can hit an open three. But it is that 3-and-D archetype, which isn't exactly Josh Hart, even though he adds value in a lot of ways. Do you think that makes the evaluation a little bit more complicated?
Not really. I think is he worth the contract? Like, I don't think it's a lot more complex than that. He's got flaws.
When you look at market, right? Like, he's not like other wings, right? So it's a little bit difficult to compare.
I mean, is there like some major difference between, say, him and, I don't know, fucking Bruce Brown, or him and Dylan Brooks?
That was honestly my only drawback with I loved the Knicks had interest in Bruce Brown. My only drawback was he is a lot like Josh Hart. So
yeah, and I mean, he just went for a number that the Knicks couldn't get to either anyway, so it didn't really matter.
But on less years, right?
Yeah. I don't really think this is. I don't want to say again. I don't think it's like a slam dunk. Like, oh my God, amazing value. But look, you got him to opt in. If Bondi's right, he's taking a little bit less than what his max extension that he was eligible for, which would have been 4 years, $81 million. So it still feels like you're getting him to give up a little bit, which seems to bode. I mean, that speaks to somewhat of the culture you've established and the fact that he's comfortable here and all those things. I think that has value. And like, is it a sunk cost? Do they have to bring him back because they go first round pick to get him? Sure, but like, I think that was already, like, they were going to bring him back. I mean, they made the trade. They didn't make the trade just to like have him for half a season. Like, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to keep him as a long-term piece. I think that's pretty obvious. And they had to pay a price for him because there were other teams interested in service. So, like, I think this is fine. If that's the number, it's okay. The Quickley part of it doesn't really concern me. I mean, I don't personally think any fan should be concerned when a report is like player wants more money than, or wants as much money as, available to them or whatever it is. Like,
said the same thing about Saquon.
Yeah, I mean, those guys want to get paid because they don't have long careers. Like, they have to cash in when they can. And in Quickley's case, like, I actually find this number pretty interesting to me, the Josh Hart number 475, because one thing I felt very strongly about, and I've talked about this previously, is if I'm Immanuel Quickley, I would be very uncomfortable. And it's just such a weird thing with like pro sports and in general, but I don't think like he's not going to get a max. Okay, we know that. He's probably not going to get close to a max. But I feel like if you offer him less than Josh Hart, or even just like the same amount as Josh Hart, it's almost like an insult to him, given the season he had. I know obviously it didn't end great in the playoffs, but like given the season he had, and not just the season he had, but the variety of tasks he performed, the leap he made as a player overall, and then I think also just like the fact that he has not ever bitched or moaned or whined, at least not openly, when he wasn't starting his second year, and he clearly should have, or when his role was kind of
His
muddled to
first
start.
year should have been
Yeah,
starting, by the
yeah,
way. But
or when his role was muddled at the start of last season, or when his minutes weren't what I'm sure would expected them to be. Like he is not complaining. I think that has value when you're trying to kind of build a culture and all those type of things. And again, like the fact that he's just been a jack of all trades for them in so many different roles and capacities that it's just like I think you need to pay him a little bit more, and that's fine because if you're basically talking about Josh Hart as a 5-year, $88 million contract, like you can go to 5,100 or 5,105 for Quickley, something like that, and he's still making less than your proverbial big three or whatever. But he's making more than the Josh Harts of the world, and guys that look. Josh Hart's a tremendous player, and I think that obviously his fit with different groupings of lineups that the Knicks have was really, really productive. So I don't want to downplay that at all. But he doesn't drive offense in a way that Quickley has demonstrated he's capable of. And that's just something that you generally need to pay up for more than what Josh Hart does, right? And so like I think you're as a front office, you're always trying to negotiate these things carefully, and there's a human element to this stuff. These guys are they're all human. They're all going to want certain things, and yeah, like I think that's an important little just segment of both negotiations, and also like just to retain Quickly, even if ultimately he's going to get traded in like a year or two down the line or whatever it is, keeping him at a number like that keeps him happy, and I think it retains his asset value in a strong position for the Knicks.
yeah, no, I don't think. I think that I also think there's a lot of people. So I know you weren't as concerned about the playoffs. I think I'm a little bit less on the, it's Tibbs's fault for not getting him involved. Part of that is you. The fact of the matter is, I said this in Discord. We posted it from the main account today. Do you know what Brunson's stats were when he played in the playoffs at age 23?
I mean, I'm assuming they weren't good because Rick Carlisle basically was like, "Oh
He
yeah,
didn't.
no, he's not
He
good."
didn't play in the playoffs at age
Yeah,
23.
yeah, and he wasn't good
He
his
didn't
first time
play
around.
as a
Yeah.
24-year-old. His stats are pretty similar to Quickly's now because of how good he was, even at that age, as a rim pressure guy. He put up close to 62 true shooting, which for his shot profile is nuts, and it's not like that has changed. But if you look at the production from the two, they're very similar. And he didn't play in the playoffs as a 24-year-old. If you look at guys who
Yeah, I mean his role got cut pretty drastically in those playoffs. He played 7 games. He played all 7 games of the series that Dallas played, but he only played 114 minutes total. And like, I mean, this was widely discussed at the time. Like, they got destroyed in his minutes, and Rick Carlisle more or less was just like, "You're not playable," and didn't use him for more than a few minutes at a time in the final few games of that series. So,
and maybe that,
yeah.
and then they decided, right? Like many people on Twitter have decided that if you can't play in the playoffs based on this sample size, you're not worth the contract you want. I think most people would now agree that was an egregious mistake by Dallas. But the point is, I think it's fair. But I've said this. The thing is this: it's become this RJ versus Quickly versus Grimes thing. The reality is, like, unless you are one of the fact that Anthony Edwards did what he did in the playoffs, like, we don't talk enough about how incredible that is. Most guys are not good at a young age in the playoffs. It's a fact. Like guys like him or even Trae Young, right? And especially guys who are perimeter players, because your jump shot is so important and there's no substitute for reps. There's very few, like, look at the guys who've come into the league as really good shooters. Maybe if Steph came as a freshman, he's just Steph, so it wouldn't have mattered. But he did spend 3 years in college. Desmond Bain came out at 23. Most of these guys who come in as like Corey Kispert spent 3-4 years in college. Most of these guys who come out like to be a shooter, and especially a pull-up shooter, it takes time for that to translate. It's why I'm still, by the way, not out on a guy like Bones Island. Like if you have that floor of interior shot making, of pull-up shooting, saying nothing about Quickley's defense, by the way, right? Like everyone loves to say, well, he didn't show up in the playoffs. Well, look at the defense. He was pretty impactful on defense. Everyone who loves to say that, it's just assuming there's not going to be an improvement. And the reason for that is, well, he's not super athletic. That's it, though, because we have seen, and Brunson is an example of a guy who wasn't super athletic. And I'm not saying Quickley, I brought this up in the Discord, and people rightfully pointed out Brunson is a top 3. I would say top 3 ball handler, like no lower than 5th in the league, right? The only guys, honestly, as ball handlers I'm taking over him are Steph and Kyrie. I think Chris Paul is washed, but sure, if you want to include him, I think is Brunson a better ball handler than Dame? I think so. Is he better the ball handler than Ja or any of these guys? Of course. He's an elite ball handler. Better than Luka, yeah, at that. But with Quickley, when you have kind of the shot making he has, when you've developed the floor that he has, people are just assuming that this is just who he is going forward. That makes very little sense. But even if it was just who he was, and as impactful as he's been, you're basically betting that the fact that he missed a bunch of open catch and shoot shots is going to last, which I don't know. And at that point, is he worth $20 million a year? I mean, is he a better player than Jordan Poole? I think so. Is he a better player than Austin Reeves got extended on a really good contract. I think
the Reeves thing is just stupid because he was a restricted free agent and then nobody had money and nobody wanted to the assumption was the Lakers would match even whatever other teams could offer. So it's like, well, do you want to keep your cap space to just throw an offer sheet out, which is likely going to get matched? And then, now you have a bunch of cap space, but there's nobody left to sign. If Reeves was an unrestricted free agent,
he would have got $20 million.
Yeah, there's no question. And forget that. Even if he was allowed to get more from the Lakers, he would have gotten more from the Lakers themselves. His situation is so not applicable to forget quickly to any of these other guys that are effectively extension eligible, right? These guys that finished their 3rd year in the NBA are extension eligible now. He's just not comparable to those guys. Just his contractual situation is just stupid. Yeah, the Lakers again somehow get fortune to smile on them just as they absolutely needed to, because they've never been lucky or fortunate ever before.
I actually think comparing the Lakers front office to the Knicks front office would be an interesting exercise because both teams have prioritized scouting. Both teams have a former agent as the GM or the head of operations. And I think both have that Russ trade was awful, but they turned it into a positive. They turned him into, I don't know if they turned the whole thing to a positive, but they turned that into a positive value. Getting back to Quickley, though,
I would say the Lakers fucked up the Russ trade, so they've recovered well, which you deserve credit for. That trade sucked, but they did recover well. And we talked about this with Leon and what they did last summer, where it's okay, fine, the 2021 summer wasn't great, but what do you can keep saying that, and then the thing is they adjusted well, so they get credit for that too. So it's
and they did add Quentin Grimes,
right? So if you want to, so and the same thing goes with the Lakers, right? They did the Russ trade, which is stupid, but they also found Austin Reeves that summer. So there's good and bad at all times, and no matter what, it's just so fucking annoying how everything always works out for the Lakers, but they have recovered well from what seemed like, holy shit, this might just fuck them over for a long time.
Yeah. But getting back to Quickley, what do you think is the next step for him, right? I mean, I don't think he's there. Maybe you disagree. I don't think he's there yet as a primary option every night. I think there's going to be some variance. But what do you think is because I look at Brunson and you look at the development that's happened. For him, it was more going inside out, whereas from Quickley, I think it's more continuing to develop some of that mid-range game and adding some creativity to his finishes. But do you think that's the kind of development path that he can follow?
So again, these splits are what they are. He started 27 games in his career, Quickley, 37 and a half minutes in those games. He's averaging 21.7 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 46, 39, 80 splits, 59 true shooting, 22.8 usage. Is that all sustainable? And there's no way to answer that, but 27 games is at least, that is a sample. That is not some bullshit number. His numbers last season as a starter were, wait for it.
You're saying 2021.
Yeah, no, just his past season. So 2022-23. 38.6 minutes per game as a starter, 22.6 points, 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 47, 40, 85 splits, 60 and a half true shooting, 22.3 usage. Let's say that I think the career sample is probably closer to reality than just looking at last year. But do I think he can get the level Brunson's at? I don't know.
And it's worth noting that whole sample came with the Knicks' best player out, right? So this is nothing. This doesn't even include, his volume would go down with Brunson out there, but his efficiency would probably be even better, like 60 true shooting with Randle as the only other really shot creators.
Yeah, he had a couple games with Brunson where he was starting because RJ was out, but yeah, for the most part, he played those games without Brunson. But I think, I don't believe that he'll ever be as capable a scorer as Brunson is, just because
Brunson's that good.
Yeah, it's also just very, very rare that guards can score at all three levels the way that Brunson does. I think Dame's awesome. I don't think Dame is even a very good mid-range scorer. He's just not something that he really does that well. So it's not easy for guards, and so
especially smaller guards, right? Because a lot of that is close quarters shooting over someone, which is just difficult to do.
I never really know. Right? I'm always I never really understand the small guard thing. So I'm just are there a bunch of guards that are big? Steph is people are oh, he's a smaller guard. I'm he's
well, I think the people that excel in the mid range, the people that excel, even Steph, there's not a whole lot of pull up mid range game in the Brunson. It's a lot of floaters. It's not, his game is very different from Brunson. If you think about the guys who are good in the mid range, DeRozan 6'7", obviously KD 6'10". If you talk, the only really small guard who's had a lot of success in the mid range has been Chris Paul. Maybe that's the best analog for Brunson's at least scoring game. Obviously, I think that as a distributor, it's not the same. But it's just, I think it's more difficult for non-wings. Let's put it like that. Forget small guards. Just players under 6'5".
Yeah, that's fine. I would just say I would. Yeah, so I don't see Quickley having that type of scoring upside. Particularly regular season is one thing, but when you're talking about playoff moments, just look at what Brunson was doing at various moments. I don't see that. I don't see that for most people. The vast majority of players. It's not exactly a huge criticism there. But what I do think is what Quickley does, obviously defensively, and then just I think his ability to play different roles has tremendous value. And so I just think he's a guy that gives you lineup flexibility and options that not a lot of guards are capable of. A guy who played very well in the playoffs to a certain degree, that I don't think is anywhere near as good as Quickley, but had nice moments, and I think showed what the value of guards like this are, is Gabe Vincent. He signed a 3-year, $33 million contract with the Lakers, which he's probably worth that. But I think he just got hot in the playoffs, but he does have that ability to, and he's way older than Quick too. At 23, he's not doing anything that Quickley's done. He's 27 now, maybe 28 even. But he has that ability to play on and off ball. There are a bunch of guards that do this, right? Kyle Lowry is one of the best at it. Steph is obviously insane and completely breaks the mold. So I think that quickly falls into like this tree of guards, and I'm always a big fan of those guards because I think they give you options. Um, what do I think he needs to get better at? I mean, for one, and I think this is where Miami really kind of they sat on this stuff is his when he drives, he's always trying to get back to his right. And I think they were aware of that. They kind of knew his reads on when he tried to step in for a floater and all those type of things. And it definitely got him out of sorts. So improving his ball handling and finishing and all that type of stuff, just being more comfortable going to his left. I think he also has to get rid of this habit he has of driving to around the free throw line or a little bit lower, then picking up his dribble and then looking to swing the ball back out. That's fine in the regular season. It's fine against a lot of teams, but against a team as disciplined as Miami was in that series, I think that got him into trouble in a few moments. Also, he will continue to improve his strength because that's just something that he clearly has focused on throughout his career. He's talked about it previously. I think that's definitely important for him. The stronger he can get, the more I think his dribble drive game becomes viable and increases his ability to score in a variety of different ways. And then, like, I don't know, I think, and I this one I really am a little confused by because it feels like this was a tactical choice that went over with the whole team. But like, I would like to see him and just generally everybody in the team just drive and kick more than they were at most of last season. And when he started games, I think we've seen him do that more. So I wonder if maybe it's like more of a role specific thing than anything else. But those are like the main things. Like I don't think there's a lot of it's refining what he's already been working on. And then if there's one thing I would be like, add this to your bag or something, it would just be like any type of consistent mid-range jumper, like not floater, like actual jump shot. I think that would be a very, very nice skill addition for him. But that's also not again, we
Which
just
I mean,
talked
he's
about it.
flashed that.
Yeah, he started doing the thing where he'd pick up the dribble, then spin back and shoot that. And I think with his release point, it's hard for him to just pull up on a dime from the mid range and shoot. But if he could add that, like upping his release point, you're basically like elevating his release point in the mid range, that would be a nice bonus. But yeah, I mean, I just don't really see his next contract being like a problem. Like it's going to be a value for the Knicks, and I think it'll be looked at as a value for a lot of teams around the league once we start getting, especially once you start seeing the contracts next summer and the summer after that. I think the value of a lot of these deals and it's not just the Knicks, but like a lot of teams got clowned for a variety of contracts this summer, and I'm kind of wondering, like, well, a year from now, 2 years from now, are those contracts really even that bad, or might they just be good? So yeah, if the Knicks if they can get this done 5-1-10, 5-1-20, whatever the hell it is, I think that would be really nice. That also locks him in, I think, through his age 29 season. So you're getting like prime years out of him. And again, we talked about this, like he has value to this current Knicks team because he is a good player and he can fill in a variety of roles when you need him to. And I think retaining that asset is really, really important for them. And obviously, as an asset, he becomes more valuable if he is locked in a contract than, if he's going to be entering restricted free agency next summer.
Do you have concerns long term about his ability to score efficiently in the playoffs, given maybe some of the shortcomings in terms of physical tools and the fact that he's not like a nuclear shooter?
Sorry, say that again. Like physical tools?
Yeah, given he has the length. We know that he's reasonably quick, but in terms of not have, he doesn't have like really that blow by speed, and he's not like a Steph level shooter or even like a Dame level shooter or something. Are you concerned long term about his ability to score efficiently in the
playoffs? I'd be more concerned if I think teams were like if he was being groomed to be some type of like primary option. But I don't.
Well, because both of us have talked about that as potential upside. So are you saying you don't see that as his upside anymore? Or?
No, primary ball handler versus primary option, I think, are different things. I
So you
don't.
don't see him as potentially a primary option.
I mean that scale. Like if you're talking about playoff championship upside type of thing, like how many guys are capable of being a number one scoring option? You know, like there's I mean of like an actual
I mean, he has one
good
on his team.
contending team, right? It's like there's a handful of those guys at any given time in the league. So I don't personally see that scoring upside for him. But like, can he be a Kyle Lowry type of guard where it's like, okay, he can't be your guy, and maybe he's not quite your second best scorer, but he can be your best ball handler, and he can get his guys the rock where they need the rock, and he can space the floor, and then he's also going to give you a bunch of value doing all kinds of intangible non-box scorer type things and defend really well and blah blah. Yeah, like I think that if there's a path to him being like a high minutes starter, if there's an archetype of role for him to fill, it is definitely a guy like Kyle Lowry, who I think he actually shares a lot of similarities to. And I think he shares a lot of similarities to somebody like Fred VanVleet as well, who quite honestly, like quickly demonstrated a lot more ability to be an efficient 2-point scorer this past year than Van Vliet ever has. And I think Fred Van Vliet, like, yeah, I know the raw numbers are fucking hideous for him, but he's a solid fucking point guard. You know, he's made an all-star team, and obviously he got the bag this summer, but I would imagine that a lot of teams would be interested in him if they had the cap space to go after him. So, like, I think quickly, am I worried about him? Like, not really at all. I mean, I'm not really worried about. I'll tell you this, like, maybe this is naive, but as good as RJ was in the playoffs and as bad as Quickly and Grimes shot the ball from the floor in the playoffs, I still am like more concerned about the role RJ is going to play long term than those guys because I just feel like for them, so much of it is just like what you talked about. It's like, are they going to shoot poorly on catch and shoot open, relatively open threes for the duration of their career in their playoffs? Because that's just like they just will never overcome some fear or whatever the hell it is. I would bet against that. And like with RJ, it's like we're not talking about he just has to cash in the open threes that we know he can make. It's like right now it's still unanswerable, or at least if it is answerable, it's not a great answer. Is like he's just not been a good shooter, so can he do that? He's not been any type of pull-up shooter, so can he do that? And those are the questions that are probably more concerning to me than the ones that we have about Quickly and Grimes, because um not because you can't improve at that, but because to be proficient at a level that is in line with like what you need from a starting wing, especially one that's getting like third usage or third option usage, he's really just far off in both those areas. So, yeah, like to bring it back to Quickly, like, no, I'm not that concerned about any of that stuff at all, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. To segue to another thing that's been a topic of conversation and does affect quickly. So with the addition of Dante DiVincenzo and of course trading Obi out, if Josh Hart is going to be the forward, that would open up, aside from whatever it gives them from the flexibility of having Hart at the four, as you've talked about. The other thing it gives them is this. It opens up more minutes at the 2 and 3 for Quickly and Grimes, and there is going to be a little bit of a log jam. I don't think DiVincenzo's like. I think if you give him 18 to 20 minutes, it's not going to cause an issue. He's not on that kind of contract. But I'm curious, what do you think they're going to do at power forward? Do you think Hart's the backup forward? Do you think maybe Dylan Windler gets a shot? Do you think they're going to have their eyes open and try to get someone?
I think it's gonna be the rotation to start the year. Like, I just don't understand why anybody is. I don't even. I don't. This is not even a conversation to me. Like, what they're gonna do with the four seems very straightforward. Like, at no point in this offseason have they even been remotely linked with the player that you're like, oh, maybe that's what they're gonna do with the backup four. Like, it's like, Derek Jones Jr. I mean, look, Derek Jones Jr. is he'd be fine as like a flyer addition to the team. But Derek Jones Jr. is not a guy that you're like, oh, well, now the backup four is we're solid, we're ready to go. And I don't see it. Like, I think they have their 9 guys, and those are going to be their 9 guys, and Tibbs is going to have to figure it out. And does that mean who's the backup four? Is it Josh Hart? Is it RJ Barrett? Does it matter that we have a distinction between those two? I don't really think so. Like, I think what you're going to get is when Randle's off the floor, you're going to have a lot of those 2 guys at the forward positions, RJ and Hart. And like, to me,
you've talked about RJ's rebounding or need for improvement there. Does that worry you at all there? Or, if one of them has to guard a guy, like, let's say there aren't a lot of, I think people have mocked, and I have chuckled at this. It's not like there are a lot of great backup fours, but a guy like Bobby Portis, for example, right? Or just a bigger guy who can get on the glass and maybe cause problems, even for a guy as effective on the glass as Hart. Does that worry you at all? Do you think they would, do you think that could cause issues?
No. I mean, look, they might have a slight drop off in terms of like defensive rebounding, but Obi wasn't a great defensive rebounder himself. And I think a lot of the success they have as a team defense in terms of their defensive rebounding stems from the fact that both Mitch and Hartenstein, especially as the year went on in Hartenstein's case, were really, really effective box out guys. And on top of that, you added Josh Hart, who's a tremendous rebounder for a wing. Julius Randle, does he get a lot of cheap, uncontested rebounds because of the box out work of the centers? Sure. But he's a pretty solid defensive rebounder. Quickley's been a pretty decent defensive rebounder. I think Grimes has more upside as a rebounder. Even RJ, for like all the shit I give him as a defensive rebounder, I mean, he's still getting you like 5 or 6 boards a game. Like, he's not exactly out there doing nothing on that end.
Right, but I mean, at the 4, it's a little bit.
I think he might be more engaged at the 4 than he is at the like on the 3. On the perimeter, you can almost like you're more susceptible to just falling asleep and not boxing guys out.
I would agree with that, but the Knicks scheme specifically wants to get the rebounds in the hands of the ball handlers. That's why they have Mitch and Hartenstein focused so diligently on boxing out, which is a tough thing to ask, by the way, because they're also asked to contest, which we shouldn't take either of those 2 for granted. But I think that's what's a little bit more damning is that like they want RJ to get the rebound, right? I don't even think he's tasked really with boxing out, and so you'd probably like him to. I think it was the Heat series was glaring. But.
Yeah, he did not have a great rebounding series against Miami, which I think is probably like, people are like, it was very weird, obviously, to see the on-off stuff with him, where it's like, anecdotally, you're watching the playoffs and you're like, well, he's playing well. Like, I don't know what can't be on him that the team. There are these things like it's like the hidden, the numbers that you don't quite fully get when you're just watching. If you're just like looking at the box score afterwards. But I think he's susceptible to giving up defensive rebounds, and like that hurts you, right? Because you're giving the opponent extra possessions. I think in that Miami series that did hurt a bunch, and I think I don't remember. I want to say I can look it up right now. I feel like he got better as the series went on with his defensive rebounding. So I mean, his last game was not good. He only had 2 defensive rebounds in 32 minutes, but he did
there was something off about him that whole game. I mean, part of it, I think, on defense, they were just sticking Jimmy on him a lot more and living with Vincent on Brunson. But, that was just that last game was weird in general, especially compared to the rest of his playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, he was averaging 4.3 defensive rebounds per game in that Miami series, which was over just under 35 minutes a night. Like, that's something that needs to get better. I think it can get better. That's actually like that's an area where it's so much of that is just like, hey, like, can you lock in a little bit more? Like, everybody falls asleep at times on the defensive glass. This is not like an RJ Barrett specific issue, but if you can just be a little bit more concentrated, and we saw Miami, right? Miami was not a great defensive rebounding team, but they did a pretty admirable job against the Knicks just by being disciplined to the game plan, right? A bunch of guys like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, these dudes were not great defensive rebounders, even like Bam, they were able to contain the Knicks to a certain degree on the glass because of their attention to detail. So I think it's absolutely something that can get better for him. So like uh, to go back to I think at the 3-4, like I don't know, you're not totally like you're kind of banking on, okay, maybe we do give up a little bit in terms of defensive rebounding, but we might be better defensively. We might now we're gonna the floor maybe theoretically more spread because you're gonna have an extra wing on the floor instead of a true like, power forward. And as much the strides that Obi made as a shooter, I still think that like there's something that is left to be desired. And certainly defenses were comfortable giving him those threes, not exactly closing out to him at speed. So like, if nothing else, I like this move because I think it is putting RJ now in more context where like there is no you can't keep saying that like, oh, they're not they need to use him at the four some, or they're just putting him in more context now, and maybe they're forcing this to like to really get a better idea of what he can do overall as a player. And in a lot of ways, they're also forcing Tibbs to just do things that he's not going to do naturally. So I'm not that worried about that part of it. I'd be more worried if like, and the thing is, we also added DiVincenzo as a good guard rebounder. Like I'd be more concerned if if we had replaced DiVincenzo, or sorry, if let's say we had added like a Malik Monk instead of DiVincenzo, where it's like, okay, yeah, the offense is going to be dynamite, but this guy doesn't really address the thing in terms of defensive rebounding that you maybe lose a bit by going smaller. So, like, I think RJ can get better, and I just think that the drop off in terms of defensive rebounding from like DiVincenzo, or sorry, from Obi to like DiVincenzo is not that significant at all.
Yeah, and it's worth noting. So shout out Ariel Pacheco for posting this. But in 94 minutes, with Hart on the floor and Randle and Toppin off, so functionally he's the 4. Knicks had a plus 4.09 rating. RJ actually had 152 minutes in lineups without Randle and Toppin. There's a plus 4.51 rating. So it has worked. There's going to be some selection bias there with the fact that Tibbs probably selective about when he would use these lineups. So we'll see if it works against, the Bobby Portises of the world or whoever. But there's certainly, and we haven't talked that much about what it can do for them on offense, right? Hart is a pretty effective dribble drive threat. He is, because of the lack of shooting, it's not as effective maybe against 2s or 3s, but if he's playing slower 4s, he should be able to get a step on them and get into the paint, where he's proven to be pretty adept. I'd like him to have a counter to his like rip through move in transition, but that's another story. So I think that it definitely makes a lot of sense if they did get a guy like Trendon Watford or someone who could play the 4, and maybe was even a better option at the 4 than RJ or Hart. Would you worry about Quickley's minutes or Grimes' minutes, or that causing a bit of a problem? And do you think that's factoring into some of these decisions?
Could you do you think?
Do you think that it would be an issue? Like if they let's say that they haven't been able to find a 4 and they're fine with Hart, but let's say they found a backup 4. Let's say PJ Washington was available for cheap or something. I would imagine it would infringe on Quickley and Grimes' minutes. Do you think that issue or that potential issue, A, is as big of an issue as maybe I'm saying it is, but also B, do you think that potential issue is why maybe they haven't tried as hard to get a 4 and are trying? And the Hart at the 4 thing is not only they like that, but also opens up more minutes for some of these younger guards.
Yeah, I mean, you got to know who your coach is. Like they had this issue again, like the last 3 years, effectively. The start of each season, they've had issues with like, and not just at the beginning of seasons. Sometimes for entire seasons, they've had some issues with the minute stuff. I think as a rookie, they probably didn't care that like Quickley was probably playing less than he should, because it's still like, hey, look, you were picking the 25th overall. We're playing well as a team. well above what anybody expected. Like, this is all gravy. Like, the fact that you're playing as much as you are, just that we're good with this. I don't think they cared about that. I think what happened during the 2021-22 season and then at the start of last year definitely feels like that influenced their choices both during the season last year when they made the rotation change, and what they've chosen to do this offseason. And not just like, you know, Quickly and Grimes and RJ to a degree, like I don't know. I wouldn't say like they're safe, like their minutes are never going to go anywhere and there's no risk of them losing minutes. I don't think that's true. But I think they're a lot more they're in the 9 guys, man, the 9-man rotation, right? They're in that mix. I think it might even be something like, hey, look, like if we bring in a power forward, one, we're never going to get a look at these different groupings that we would maybe like to see and explore and get data on. And also, it could be as simple as like, hey, like we actually like Deuce. So if we're going to have a 10th guy that's situational, we would rather have it be a guy who's making peanuts this next year, and who we do have to make a decision on contractually fairly soon. I mean, he's up for he could be a free agent at the end of next season. So I think that might be a part of it as well. And I think that's probably a little bit under discussed because even last year at the deadline, I think it was reported that like the Knicks. I mean, I know it was worded this way, which made it kind of funny. But it was like the Knicks are not entertaining any trades for Deuce McBride or something, which obviously is not true. Like, I'm sure if somebody called them up and was like, yeah, we will give you a lottery pick for Deuce McBride, they'd probably do that. But I do think it speaks to the point of like, hey, like we actually like what we've seen from him, and we know the shot hasn't come around yet in the NBA. But if it does, if that happens, we really like what we have in this player, and we would, because we like that, we want to continue to at least have him in the mix where if somebody goes down, he can step into the rotation. And so, like, I think that's probably informed some of their thinking as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point about Deuce. I do think we should read some of these comments. So we got Ace Bouchard. Well, let's start with Chris Bernhard. I don't know if I've ever been so bored by an NBA offseason like I have with this one. No dumb Dame news like the Donnie stuff last year. Nothing with Harden and Embiid. Just sim to September. Do you think this is an unusually boring offseason?
I think. Is it like I don't know. Like I was last season some like I think last season was a pretty boring offseason. It just felt
for us it was different because
it just felt not Mitchell. Boring for us because we had the Donovan Mitchell thing. But I guess I'm sure if you talk to like Heat fans, they'd be like, this offseason's been crazy. Like, oh, fucking the Dame thing is wild. And if you talk to Portland fans, I'm sure they'll say the same thing. Like, I don't think it's been. I mean, from the way, I mean, even from the way Chris has said this comment, it almost sounds like he's talking about more NBA specific more Knicks specific than NBA specific. You know, with the dumb Dame news like the Donnie stuff last year, nothing with Harden and Embiid, which seems like it's more about us. I don't think so. I think people, NBA reporters have this habit of like making every offseason seem like it's going to be the most monumental thing that's ever happened, and it just never is. And
why would they do that?
Yeah, why would they do that? And then I think fans like myself and all, like I mean, a lot of people, we expect because these people who are plugged in are saying these things that it's going to happen. And it just never does. Like, we see NBA reporters, they're wrong all the fucking time. You know, like, I mean, if you look at some of the Dame reporting prior to the draft, like I need to go back and find this clip, but there was like a clip of, I want to say, who's the Draft Express guy that's still at ESPN? Is that Givney?
Yeah, it's Givney.
Yeah. I think he was on a pod and he was like talking about like, oh no, like Dame, look, he's one of these fucking guys in the NBA who just, he goes into the facility and he's like locked into the CBA and he understands the value of the third pick and that, Scoot, like if they draft Scoot, he could be more valuable than what they would trade Scoot for. And he's okay with that. He understands what the front office is doing. And I'm just like, a week later, you're like, so you're full of shit because your buddy works for like the Blazers front office and you're doing them a solid. Like, give me a break. I think a lot. I hate doing this, but it's like a lot of these guys. One, they're carrying water for their various sources. Two, it is in their interest to be like, this offseason is gonna be crazy. Make sure you stay tuned in to fucking the NBA, inside the NBA, or whatever the fuck, like Locked On Knicks. Yeah, fuck you, Alex, you bum. No, but like, it's what it is. So I don't personally think it's been that boring. I think it's actually just, a lot of shit happened initially. If you think about it, the draft was kind of boring, especially after I thought the draft might be actually pretty crazy, but the draft was pretty boring, and I thought the offseason was fine though. I mean, we got Chris Paul traded to the Warriors. Think about that. Like that happened. Bradley Beal got traded to the Suns.
Well, I mean, so how the closest comparable I can think of to that Chris Paul trade is that that Kyle Lowry trade to Miami. Do you think this is a bigger deal, less of a big deal?
It's not. It's probably less of a big deal because Chris Paul is not as good as Kyle Lowry was at that point. But it's a bigger deal because it's Chris Paul, who's a bigger star than Kyle Lowry, and he's going to the Warriors, who have the point guard who took
they traded
Steph.
Jordan.
Yeah, they took like Steph took the crown from Chris Paul as the best point guard in the league, and obviously Chris Paul and Draymond have had their own beefs and whatever. Like, it's a fun story. I think it's a fun story. I think, like there are annoying, stupid superstar trade rumors out there, be it with Embiid or Harden or Dame, who's obviously very actively seeking a trade, and so is Harden for that matter. There was stuff with Paul George, and like there is stuff that's out there, and like I don't know. Like I guess maybe I'm just enjoying the boringness of the offseason so much because I think last offseason was a terrible fucking experience for me, and I am a lot happier this offseason just not having to talk about various iterations of the Donovan Mitchell. How could we get Donovan Mitchell without totally fucking over our pick future? And
is passing on Jalen Duren going to be the same thing as the Blazers passing on Michael Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, this is also good with the Rudy Gobert trades from Sure, the Rudy Gobert trade kind of made last offseason unnecessarily entertaining.
Especially for me, who made a viral meme out of it.
Yeah, no, I do think that we haven't had that one or two big super splash moves, but those could still be coming. Like the Dame trade. I think especially now with the NBA ruling, I mean, we should probably talk about that. Is like they effectively ruled, right, that like you can't be just telling teams like I'm not going to show up to work if you trade for me. And I think I'd be. I don't want to say I'd be surprised. I think we will get a Dame trade. I feel like there will be a team that emerges and will pull the trigger on it that isn't Miami and that can offer them closer to what they want. I do wonder if that's New Orleans, interestingly enough, which would be an interesting fit. But I think we'll get a Dame trade.
What about Boston?
Look.
I mean, they just signed Jaylen Brown, but maybe that's a good thing, right? If Portland.
Well, they can't trade Jaylen Brown now for a year. But I mean, I would have done that trade. I would have traded him for fucking Dame in a second. But yeah, there's always. I mean, look, today we got huge news that Masai Ujiri, pulling another masterstroke, signed Garrett Temple to a contract. So we're still getting fireworks here in late July. Yeah, no,
he's gonna take out your heart. He's gonna eat your brain like the Temple of Doom.
No. Well, he eats monkey brains, but then he also rips your heart out in that too. But like, yeah, I mean, there's also lesser named stuff like Siakam. Like, I mean, who cares about Pascal Siakam unless you're a Raptors fan? But there's those things. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's been a slower offseason. I mean, it definitely was slower than last year, but I don't know. I'm not that surprised by it. Like, I just kind of feel like this is the nature of these things. And I also think teams are working out, like, coming to grips with the new CBA. And we can sit and, like, analyze the impact of, like, okay, well, now if you're at this apron, you can only do this thing and you can only aggregate salary this way. Yeah, but, like, when you're a team having to make those decisions in real time without seeing how the restrictions work in actual practice, it's hard. What does he say in Oppenheimer? Theory can only take you so far. So, like, I think you need, like, teams actually have to, like, be
I
like,
don't think he comes across looking
yeah,
that great there. Near
no,
zero, near zero.
it's near zero. It's basically the same thing. The new CBA and testing a nuclear device. But, like, I think that if I would expect this would be my guess. Expect there to be more activity at the trade deadline and next summer than there is now, because I think this new CBA threw a lot of
Wrenches.
I just think teams weren't necessarily or didn't fully understand what the ramifications of what was coming down the pipeline, and you also have teams that are, like, in cap situations, locked into contracts, and all pick encumbered that are more restricted now because of these rules. And so even if they want to make moves, they need to extricate themselves from positions where now those moves would be available to them.
Yeah, I think that, and there's so much of this is, I think that we've lived in an age where we talked about this, but super teams have been kind of the standard. And now, unless you really have a couple of those top guys, like that's people are like, is the CBA going to accomplish what it's supposed to accomplish? Is it going to help stop player movement or all of these things? I think that what it will accomplish is, I think the the super team construct being the most efficient way, or at least understood that way, is going to change. And I think you might see that, in this age, maybe kind of spreading out your chips a little bit more is going to work better for NBA teams. And that's why, I think that a lot of the aversion to the Josh Hart move, and I don't think this is unfounded, because if you look at the mid 2000s, look about how many, there was that one summer, I think the Knicks actually made a good deal. They got Robin Lopez for 4 for $54. I really liked that deal, and then for some reason they traded it from Rose. But that same summer, you had guys like, was it the same summer or was the year afterwards when they gave Noah, which doesn't make the Knicks look as good. But you had Mozgov getting 4 for $65, right? You had a lot of people just getting money thrown at them. And I think the reaction for us is, if the player is mid and he's getting what looks like a lot of money, it's a bad deal, right? I think that the ideal construct for most people would probably be rookies and min vets combined with a couple of superstars. And that made a lot of sense. Like, especially if you follow the analytics of it, the people, like the top guys, like a LeBron or like a Dame or a Steph, obviously are going to outperform max contracts. That's why the max is put in place, so that, other guys, so you can level the playing field a little bit. So the only guys that outperform are really those max guys, but really the guys who are worth the max. And then at the bottom, rookies, really, right? And then you sprinkle in a few vets who can fill their roles. And I think you now might see it evolve to a more egalitarian structure. I'm curious if you think that's a thing with this new CBA, and I think you have a much better understanding of it than me. So,
yeah, I do think so. Like, I think I've seen a lot of people be like, "Well, this is going to kill the middle class," and I just don't think that's true.
I think it'll have the opposite effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need time. Like, again, you can say it killed the middle class this summer, which I think is.
I mean, with Brooks, Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, but I think, but then you look at some of the guys that signed, like, like the Suns got all these dudes on minimums, and, like, I think that got really gassed up out of, like, I don't know. There's some weird fucking media push for the Suns where it's like, oh, like, they had such a great offseason. I'm like, okay, look, like, Eric Gordon on a minimum is pretty nice, but, like, Eric Gordon's also 75 years old. Like, can we fucking relax on, like how good of a move this is? Like, oh my God, they didn't bring back Jock Landale. They went out and got, like, Keita beats Diop, and it's like, give me a fucking break, dude. Keita beats Diop he hasn't played a meaningful minute in
Oh,
the
Eric
NBA.
Gordon's less than a year older than me. Fuck
Yeah.
you, Sean. I don't appreciate that. I'm not
Yeah.
74 years old.
Yes, you are. We both are. Keita Bates Diop is like, he hasn't played a meaningful minute since he graduated from the dumbest university in the entire country, Ohio State. Like these guys, okay, like give me like again, were these guys minimum players? Probably not if there was more money available on the market, but there wasn't. So it is what it is. And like I think in the years, like as we go on, one, the cap is jumping 10% pretty steadily from everything that's been reported. The other part too is now that teams are aware of what the CBA is, they will adjust their plans and how they want to manage their cap situations and the type of trades they will make accordingly. And I expect that over the next 2 or 3 years, what you will see is, yes, there still be teams that are in a situation like the Suns, where it's, yeah, you've got your 3 guys, you're paying a shit ton of money, and then you get to round out the roster with like, a exception here or there, but mostly veteran minimum guys. I think Boston is an example of a team who's trying to figure out like, okay, like I personally don't think they had a great offseason. I understand why they did what they did, but I just don't really.
Actually, if KP's healthy, I love that for them.
Yeah, I don't think a team that sucked at passing and ball handling did anything to address that situation. And I don't care that. I think they already had the best spacing in the league. I already argued about this with President Friday. Like they already had the best spacing in the league. I think they're diminishing returns as good as KP is relative to like Al Horford at the 5. I just don't think
Al
that
Horford is also, by the way, we should say, a ticking time bomb. Like you
Yeah.
don't know how many
Of
years
course.
you're going to get out of it. Every year could be the
Absolutely.
episode.
I think getting Porzingis is a good trade in isolation. Like I don't, especially the price they paid. I just don't think that their roster is actually necessarily better than it was last year. But I think, they did good work in terms of like they accumulated more draft capital moving forward. They got an extra first. They got that Golden State first next year. They have a bunch of second round picks they've amassed. Like they didn't bring back Grant Williams because that would have put them further into the second apron. And like, I think they're working through some things, but they have a lot of assets. They have all their own picks. They have a bunch of these seconds again. They have an extra first again. Like, what can they turn that into? What exactly are their, what can they do with these things? I think that's something that like they might kind of be in an in-between step because they're working out like, well, how we want to give ourselves flexibility, but we want to try and get better. And I think they're trying to walk that path right now. And then like, I think you see a team like Washington that was just like, okay, like we can either give Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps big new contracts, bring them back, and then, we'll still be stuck, or
Work our wizardry.
yeah, or do what we're doing and just kind of really nuke this thing and try to start from scratch. Like there's just a lot of stuff where it looks like teams are adjusting course and kind of figuring out how to recalibrate under this new CBA. So I personally think that there's a world where like the Knicks are an example of this where, yeah, I mean, we can sit here and talk about like, oh, like, well, they're gonna have to pay Jalen Brunson in 2 years, they're gonna have to pay Randall in 2 years, whatever. Even if those guys get maxed, like their maxes are not going to be in the ballpark of somebody like Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or any of these supermax eligible guys, if for no other reason that they are not supermax eligible. Like Jalen Brunson is not eligible for a supermax. Julius Randle will not be eligible for a supermax. It's just a fact. So
what would Randall have to do if he makes
he
All
can't.
NBA next year?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they were not drafted by the Knicks and they didn't get traded to the Knicks while still on their rookie contracts. So like they're just not going to be eligible for it. And I like.
So what is Randall's max deal?
I would have to look, but he should probably be eligible for the 30% max in 2 years, I believe. So that would be
45.
He might even be eligible for the 35% max. When did he come to the NBA?
2015.
Okay, so he would be, I think he has 10 years of service, so he'd be eligible for the 35% max. I doubt he would get a full 35% max contract. I just can't see that occurring. Maybe
2014, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I can't see that happening. Jalen Brunson would only be eligible for the 30% max, I'm pretty sure. So, like, even in this scenario, they're not necessarily going to be in the situation where, like, oh, these two guys are commanding, like, so much money that all we can do is veteran minimums and all this type of stuff. I think they're in a position where, like, look, they have they might. We just talked about two guys at the start of this pod, Josh Hart and Immanuel Quickley, who could be making, something like 17, 18, $20 million, whatever it is, in that kind of in between range. And I think there'll be teams that will be like, hey, look, we have our one guy. So we can either try to go get a second guy, or we can just try to round out this roster with as much talent as possible.
And do you even think that's a new thing with the CBA? Because I remember there was a couple years ago, you did a pod with Prez. Yeah, sorry, very random throwback, but this was kind of the height of the. This was part one, I think, of the Knicks should trade for Zach LaVine discussions. But I think both of you had mentioned you were talking about Fred VanVleet potentially paying him something like $20 million. This was the summer he got the 4 for 85. I think this was Leon Rose's first summer. So the Knicks, I think,
the summer of COVID.
Summer of COVID, the summer where they had apparently offered Gordon Hayward,
bring me back
4 for 80, and yeah, take me back to COVID. A lot of alone time. The point is that, like, I think Prez made the point, or maybe it was you, that, like, look at a guy like Ricky Rubio. He was signed for, I think, $17 million a year back then, which was looked as an overpay, but especially having Booker and what he's able to do for the team. These kind of guys, it's not like there aren't guys who can live up to that value in the mid range. I think that, or in the middle range, or those kind of areas, you can get value there. You just have to have, I think, the right role for them. But I think that is, that is, I think, an interesting thing, because I think most NBA fans would say you get a star and then you figure it out afterwards, right? I think the idea of building around the middle class, for lack of a better term, seems like you're just going to end up overpaying. And, I think that, I wonder, is it changing because of the cap, or is this maybe just an area of arbitrage that's been around because these players get undervalued for quite some time, or they get undervalued relative to the value they can provide in a specific situation?
Yeah, I just, my thinking going back even like a couple years, I actually said this, was that I just thought, because of how cost prohibitive all these superstar trades were, that, like, it was going to lead to teams like a freeze kind of on the market, because there'd just be not as many teams, one, probably willing to pay those prices. Two, the teams that are willing to pay those prices would have already paid him, so that they can't do anything for a few years. And then the third was just like, I mean, I don't even know if I realized this at the time, but, like, part of it is because the extension rules are so favorable to teams, and I guess players now too, like, you're just more inclined to, like, extend with your team. And then even if you want to get traded, be like, I'll figure it out later. It's not a big deal. So my feeling was just like, you were going to see a lot of teams that stayed together for longer than we had been seeing over the previous decade, where it was like, oh my God, player movement all the fucking time. And there's still plenty of player movement. There's certainly more player movement now than there was, like, in the early 2000s and stuff like that. But I think we're moving away a little bit from it being such a transactions heavy league, which is probably why some people are like, this offseason's boring. But, like, I mean, look at the Knicks, right? Like, the Knicks they've basically changed, they changed one rotation player. That was it. That was their offseason. Like, they did not do a whole lot. Again, they're not necessarily the only team. I mean, there are teams that have had plenty of kind of change, right? But even a team like the Lakers, right? They didn't bring back. They brought back most of their team, and then they added, like, Gabe Vincent and Jackson Hayes, and I don't know.
I heard they reached out to Melisandre to restore LeBron's youth by 20 years.
But yeah, like, so I think even a team like the Clippers, right? They haven't really done anything. A lot of teams haven't done much, And
Houston, I guess, right?
yeah, but
they
Houston had
might
cap.
do Harden.
Yeah, but Houston had cap space, so that was like a little bit different. But they didn't make like they kept their core guys, the guys they want to keep, right? Like, okay, sure, they dumped Ty Washington and Usman Garuba, but like I wouldn't say those guys were exactly key components to their rebuild, right? Like it just seems like most teams in the NBA are just in a position where it's like, hey, look, the new CBA is what it is, which is a lot more drastic in the penalties that you're facing if you do certain things. And then on top of that, like the draft and development, I think has become more important because again, like forgetting even the new CBA in the past CBA, by the end of it, your every trade for a star was like, well, you have to give us all your picks. And so it's like, okay, well, if you weren't willing to pay those prices, then drafting well and developing well becomes paramount. I mean, it's more important than anything, arguably. So like, it felt like teams were getting better at. I don't want to say better at like drafting and developing, but more invested in it. And so I think in a lot of ways that's. I mean, that's a very broad answer, but like, I'm not totally shocked that the league has become a little less transaction heavy, and I do feel like I think it's more viable to win a championship probably now without like multiple superstars than it has been in forever. Like I really do. Like that's not to say you don't need a superstar, but the days of like, well, if you don't get three superstars, what are you even doing? I think those days are over, and I think personally that they probably should have been over much sooner because, I mean, I talked about this in real time. Like I did not. I thought the Harden trade for Brooklyn was stupid. I wouldn't have done it. And there are a lot of people who are like, well, you got to do it, and I'm like, well, yeah, maybe if all three of them weren't like fucking unreliable narrators, sure, but they're all unreliable narrators. I don't think you could do that trade. So like, and I mean, look at all these. We've talked about this many times, but all these all-in trades, like the logic was like, well, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it, and it's like, okay, well, how many of them are happy that they've with these trades they've made? How many?
Are
Like,
any of us really happy?
true. I'm not. But
how
like,
many have actually? That's a good point.
Like, do you like we can just do this? Like, do you think the Clippers are happy with their ROI?
I think hindsight. That's a tough one because hindsight. If you
Right,
knew
but I'm not saying like
Alexander,
I'm not saying like
it would be different if Shai Alexander
Yeah.
was just a solid player instead of what he's become. So, but no, I don't think.
Yeah. Okay. Do we think the Nets were happy with their ROI?
No, we are resulting there. I still think you do it anytime because they're the Nets. And they fucking suck.
Sure. Are the Sixers happy with their ROI?
On Harden?
I mean, they haven't. I would say like none of their
TBD.
moves individually were all in, but they've ultimately ended up in a position where they are all in, and it's like they're stuck.
TBD. I mean, they really fucked up with the Butler thing. That was the big thing. Like not trading for him, but
no, the trade for him was fucking brilliant. Like they didn't give up anything to get him. It was like literally Robert Covington, Saric, Jared Bayless, and like 2 seconds or something. Good job, GM Tibbs. Do you think that the Timberwolves are happy with their trade
for Rudy? Oh.
Rudy. No. Do you think this? Okay, this is actually the most interesting one because somebody brought this up about Phoenix, right, being here. But do you think Phoenix is happy with the results so far? And then more importantly, if you had to bet, will Phoenix win a championship? Like I would bet no. I mean, you should actually bet no on any individual team to win a championship because that's usually the better play. But I would be.
What would you rank them though in the NBA? There's only one team I'm putting head and shoulders above them, and that's really, I think, Phoenix
Denver.
is a more complete team. Yeah, but
I think Denver is better than them. I
don't think Boston's better than them.
I think the Lakers are better than them. I think the Celtics are better than them.
But LeBron is falling apart.
But he
is aging.
Rapidly. He's aging, and I still think like they were once they made those trades at the deadline, they were pretty clearly the second best team in the West.
You thought they were? I did not think they were better than Phoenix, and now Phoenix. I'm higher than on Beal than you. I guess that's part of it.
Yeah, Beal at point. I'm fucking out on that.
I don't think that's gonna happen. Like Booker's gonna run the offense. Like,
I don't like that either. Like I like Booker running point sometimes. I don't like Booker being, hey, go be fucking Michael Jordan. Like, no, not a huge fan of that plan. I probably am weird. I think I like Golden State more, but I think I'm just like very high on the vibes being good, and that will make them better. And I think Steph is still fucking amazing.
I can't. Sorry, dude. Draymond is just too much. I can't bet on the vibes. Yeah, historically they made it work. I can't bet on vibes for a
yeah, I think the vibes will be fine now the pool's gone.
Cantankerous, aging. Like Draymond Green is basically Junior Soprano at this point. So I don't know.
I think,
and every day, every week, the talent less and less. Sorry, I know you hate Jordan Poole. Draymond Green cost them a pretty damn good player, and that might be unfair to put all the blame on him. But you're supposed to be the bigger person.
I agree with that.
I don't think he's been like he is a very. They know how to handle him. It's a little bit like this is a player he's drawn a lot of parallels to in his career, but it is a little like if you watch The Last Dance, like Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan were the perfect people to handle Rodman, right? Like Rodman just said, "I need to go to Vegas in the middle of the season." How many coaches would put up with that and could handle that?
I need somebody to clip just Stacey saying Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan were the perfect people. Just that. No. Don't ignore the rest of the sentence. Yeah, I mean, like I
do want to add.
I'm always out on these really teams that are like 3 guys and bunch of.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I think Phoenix is very much a TBD. Yeah. Just on my last note, I did want to add. I just found out today that Dennis Rodman's daughter is like one of the stars of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, which is pretty cool. I saw like a cool piece about her in ESPN. So fun tangent, but always great to see it. Yeah, you can see where she gets her athletic gifts from.
Yeah, she's actually really fucking good. Sorry, Ariel, Ohio State sucks. Not your fault.
I'll second that.
This was
today we're gonna be peaceful. They just stole a quarterback from us. Yeah, fuck that shit.
This is an interesting comment. I actually thought about this. I don't know. Macri loves to remind everyone that Randle has been all NBA 2 times in the last 4 years. Where do you think he ranks in the other 2 years? That's from Loki Whitaker. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. I have no idea. I actually think I think his first year in New York is a little bit underrated. Not to say it was like some amazing season.
He was a lot better under Miller.
Yeah, he was a lot better under Miller. The entire team sucked ass under Fizdale to the point where like it was like, look, man, Randall's probably just getting scapegoated here because he was like our big ticket item in free agency. But he was a lot better under Miller. You even had he had some games where you could kind of see the glimpses of the type of stuff that we saw more of the following season. I think he had a game against the Nets where he absolutely lit them up for like 39 points or something. But like, I don't know. His first year in New York, I would say that was about an average season. Like he was about a solid starter. And while I still wanted to trade him after that season, I didn't think that they should I didn't think they needed to attach stuff to dump him or anything like that, and I wouldn't have done it. So I would say he was about a solid starter after his first season. I don't know where that ranks him in the NBA. What is that, like?
Top 50?
Like top 75, right? It's like half the league.
The top divided by a third, right? So.
Well, I'm saying like 75 players start, or 75. Like there's 150 starters in the league.
Yeah.
So solid starter, I think, is something like.
So an average starter is 75.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Something like that. I mean, the year he had in 2021-22 was honestly abysmal.
21-22.
It was awful. Like, and I think you could argue, was he one of the worst players in the NBA? I think it's always weird to talk about this. Like, was he actually one of the worst players in the NBA? Probably not. But was he?
When you think about his context,
most destructive, or yeah. Was he actually one of the most destructive players in the league to his team? Yeah, like he might have been the most. I think it's fair to argue that. He was god awful. So like I think, and I agree with John. Like you do have to respect the fact that he's been all NBA twice. Like whatever you want to say about the playoff stuff, which is more than fair to criticize him for. The fact that he's had 2 seasons that are worthy of selection to be effectively picked as like one of the top 15 players in the league means something. It means a lot, quite honestly. But yeah, it's been mixed in with these 2 seasons where it's like the first season I'm just like, okay, whatever, he's kind of solid, it's fine. The second one, I have no that was one of the most destructive individual seasons I've seen in fucking
The second
forever.
bad year, so it's third year.
Yeah, his third year. That was atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, I think what does encourage me long term, there's this Jekyll and Hyde thing. I think it's very clear that like his first 3 years, really, he was the number one option for better or for worse. His role wasn't really that different in his second year. I think he's talked about how having Reggie Bullock there and knowing where guys were helped a lot, as opposed to kind of whatever they were doing under Fizdale. I think more structure helped him I think he is a guy who plays well in structure and knowing where his reads are. When he has to improvise, when he kind of has to read and react and those kind of things, that's where he struggles. And the sad thing is there isn't really a way to get around that in the playoffs. But I think what was most encouraging and why I don't, and this is not exactly the question. So my answer would be, how do you rank him? He's somewhere in the 25 to 30 range. I think we've seen players in the past who are really good regular season performers who struggle in the playoffs. Randle to me is about as high as peak DeRozan. Is that fair to say? Like Raptors DeRozan?
Yeah.
I am a little more optimistic because I think his second year, the COVID year when he was really good, he was so dependent on just outlier shot making, right? He did not have a good shot profile. I don't think his space creation got that much better beyond just what he's already able to do with his physical gifts. His defense, he was a little bit more locked in, but to be honest, even at that point, beyond the games where they used him as a switcher, and you could see, like, ironically, that Hawks series, like his best defensive probably stretch of his career was that Hawks series where he couldn't do anything right. He was pretty effective switching on to Trae Young. I think what gives me more confidence about last year, even with this playoff fiasco, is his shot profile was a lot different. He only shot 34% from three. It's not like he shot the ball that well. His mid range was 43%, which is about the same it was in 2020, but it was on much lower volume. It seems pretty sustainable. I think that for as much flack as we give him for kind of his ball dominant style, I think he's actually been pretty good at playing off of others. When it comes to Randle, I want to ask you about this. So I think both you and me and a lot of people, Jeff Rasmussen has talked a lot about this or had talked a lot about it at the time. The first couple of games, the Cleveland series, the Knicks staggered Randle. Part of that was Brunson got into foul trouble very quickly. And so he didn't have a choice, but he staggered Randle and Brunson. And I actually really like the idea of Randle being the guy to babysit bench units. I just don't love Randle or RJ in that role right now. I think more than going against bench units, I think RJ has really served well when he can go against smaller defenders. I think his best opportunity to do that is when he plays with Brunson, and he can either get switches on those screens, or other teams will throw their best wing on Brunson and open up the opportunity for they try to hide a guard on RJ. The biggest thing he proved was we had Jordan Cohen on here before the Cavs series, and I talked to other bloggers for the Cavs who were like, yeah, we'll live with Garland on RJ. We don't make RJ beat us, and he beat them because you can't put us that's one thing we figured out is whatever his flaws are, he's going to beat up on small guards. I don't know if you get those opportunities with the bench unit, but the lineup I'm most excited to see is Quickley. I'm not to say, so in terms of babysitting the bench, right, or having a starter play with the bench if you have a 9-man rotation, Brunson doesn't need to do that just because that guy's going to score no matter what. The starters without him, I do worry about the offense. The starters with but like any lineup with him is going to score. That's not an issue. RJ, especially last year, I think he has good chemistry with Quickley, but I just think as long as you get him away from Randle, he's going to be better. But I actually like him with Brunson a lot. But it's really Randle who I think that struggles sometimes against elite defenders, but get him against bench bigs and get him in space. And the Knicks are, weirdly enough, a team with better defenders off the bench than in the starting lineup. If you put Randle next to Quickley, DiVincenzo, I would play Grimes with this lineup. He's technically a starter as well, but I would play him with him. Randle, and then I would go with Mitch just because the perimeter defenders are really good, but they're a little small. So if for whatever reason you are giving some dribble penetration, I would prefer Mitch in this lineup to Hartenstein, but a lot of people would prefer Hartenstein for kind of the ball movement. What you have is you have 4 good to great defenders around Randle. You have 3 really good shooters. Everyone is a good passer besides Randle, and everyone pushes the pace. And between Mitch's hands and ability to force turnovers and blocks, and the other 3 and their ability to force turnovers, you're also going to get into a transition a lot. Do you think there's a chance that Tibbs does do that, makes Randle the bench guy, brings him out at the 6-minute mark, then brings him back at the beginning of the second quarter? Then how much do you think that would improve his effectiveness?
I would be surprised because he just hasn't done it for 3 years.
He hasn't had the options he's had, but yeah.
He hasn't had the options, but I think even going back to his time in Chicago and Minnesota as a coach, he's had these tendencies to keep his groupings pretty rigid. And for that reason, I'd be surprised. But to his credit, he did go with a lineup last year that I think all of us were pleasantly surprised by. Or at least, no, I shouldn't say all. Most people were pleasantly surprised by, even if it came at the expense of Cam Reddish, who, congrats on signing. Oh, I forgot the Lakers added him on a minimum, so they definitely
Paul George.
Yeah, they won the offseason. So I think that's evidence of something, I guess. And if he is willing, or if he's at least open to playing RJ and Josh Hart, kind of as his backup 4s, it does speak to at least some willingness to be less rigid about stuff that he traditionally hasn't, or they traditionally has been very, very strict on. So yeah, maybe, but I just don't see it because the thing. But
you agree that lineup would be fucking fire, right?
Yeah, and it would be, and I actually I was disappointed as that Cleveland series went on because, not because obviously as the series went on and we kept kicking their ass more, I was very, very happy. But I was disappointed in the sense of, I thought that in that first game when he pulled Randle from the rotation early and then brought him back in, I thought that was a tactical adjustment that they had made, that they were let's steal some minutes here and then we could bring Randle back in. And yeah, I thought that was smart. And so to see that as Randle got his conditioning back or whatever, that the rotations just resembled more and more of what we expected and what we were accustomed to was a little disappointing. And it's also why I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be RJ with that bench unit predominantly. And I'm not so unhappy about that because if you are do I think that they love RJ and that they're super committed to him? And no, I don't. I don't live under a rock. I think we've talked about this before, but I think there's a reason why they were connected with guys like Paul George and Zach LaVine this summer. I feel very, very strongly that in any iteration of those deals, that was to upgrade on the starting wing spot that RJ Barrett currently occupies. But obviously that hasn't happened because those teams are not interested in dealing at a price the Knicks would be willing to do. I think if you have RJ, you need to put him in lineups and positions.
I think you need to separate him from Randle.
Yeah, that's part of it. And then the other part is also just putting him in lineups where it's you remove some of the things that I don't want to say people use them as excuses, but the things that you can point to and be well, this wasn't great, was it? If RJ Barrett's going to be whatever the best version of him is, he needs to play in lineups that have more space, lineups that have more speed generally, and lineups that can probably cover for some of his issues defensively. And like, I like putting him at the 4 or the 3 or however you want to phrase it, with the other 3 guys on the floor being Quickley and, let's say Dante or Grimes, who can shoot the rock. And then Hart, who, he can't shoot it that great, but like, again, if it's RJ and him at the 3-4, that's much better than, RJ and him at the 2 and 3. And having only one big on the floor, he's kind of the guy in that lineup that's going to be leaned on to get into the paint consistently and collapse the defense. So I think you're putting him in a position now where it's like, hey, look, like these minutes, they've kind of been your minutes before, but now they're your minutes in a way that feels like if there is an upside to him reaching a higher level, and I don't just mean like gradual improvement of skills, but I mean like truly achieving a higher level, like elevating his status as a player. I do think that this is an avenue you need to explore, and I think it's a really good thing that they are leaning into it.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, you have all of these good perimeter defenders. At some point, you just say, "Fuck the size." Like they can all defend. Grimes can defend threes. Like I don't care if Grimes is not ideal size for a 3. Like against benches, that's not going to matter. And I think the 3 of them on defense will be really fun together. They're going to shoot really well, and I mean, Quickley, like he's the only guy who had a positive net rating with Randle on that. As you mentioned, that abysmal year 3. So I just think that I think pairing him, like, does Brunson help Randle? Of course, but pairing, like, even in his worst years here, when he plays with Quickley, it's not even that Quickley gets an easier shot so much as the off-ball gravity and the movement and the improved defense really helps Randle. So I like that pairing too.
Yeah, I actually think he plays
the downside is Quickley won't get as much on-ball reps to the extent that that's required.
I don't
but
even
they
think
do
that's
play well together.
Yeah, and I don't think that's really a huge downside because like it's not a problem for me if Quickley's at like 22 usage or something. Like that's fine. But like I actually think that they have a more natural kind of like complementary play style at times than Brunson and Randle necessarily do. Brunson's just a better player, so it doesn't it kind of makes up for that and then some. But if you're just talking about like which pairing feels like it operates,
the sum is greater than the parts. Right?
Yeah, which one is like a little bit more seamless of a fit? I think Quickley plays better with Julius, or at least easier with Julius than Brunson does. And like I think, look, it's a 9-man rotation. Guys are going to get injured. There'll be plenty of minutes to go around. All these combinations, in theory, should be seeing plenty of time together, and we really should not have to worry about like, is this guy going to have enough time? Are we going to see enough of these dudes? Are we going to see enough of this combination? I mean, we should harbor those concerns because of what Tibbs's history is as a coach, but like, realistically, asking him to deal with these nine-man rotation is not too hard, and I think if he can get over the kind of rigidity of rotation stuff, then we could really lean into some rotations, and not even just rotations, but like lineup combinations that we haven't seen enough of over the past few years. So like, yeah, I mean, and I see this comment too. I wanted to mention this. This is from Loki Whitaker. 2021, he was getting plenty of minutes against bench units and cooking them. That was a little bit different to me because I think that was less about he's playing bench units and more that he was playing with our bench a lot more because our bench was way better than our fucking starters were that year. Shout out Alfred Payton.
He also fit in well with Frank. I think you had a long article about at PNT about how Frank's net rating improved. And Frank was always a pretty solid on-off guy, but I do think that he actually weirdly meshed kind of well with Randle. I think guys who know where to cut and know where to be and make life easy for Randle in his reads are, and Quickley's obviously way better at that than Frank, but yeah.
I think it's a lot about like if guys are willing to feed Randle offensively, then that usually works pretty well for him because he's a good play finisher, and obviously that's part of the reason why the Brunson addition helped so much, right? Is it took away a lot of the creation responsibilities that he had, and it was more like, okay, like just focus more on scoring and focus more on getting and shooting from the right places. And like, we don't need you to do the Julius James thing anymore. Like, you can just be Julius Randle. And I think that helped him a lot last year for sure. Is it, is it, am I a Randle believer? I don't know. The playoffs, it's really hard to just like be like, I 100% believe in him without any. I just need to see him play well in the playoffs, right? Like, that's really what it is. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, I was actually with like exactly at this place with Brunson before his 2022 playoffs, where I was like, I mean, even in the regular season
against Cleveland, or you mean Dallas?
No. I mean, when he was in Dallas, because even in Dallas, like, he had been a good regular season player. Like, that was not in question, really. It was just about the playoffs with him. And
sorry, real quick tangent. Do you think if the Knicks had asked for him instead of Dennis Smith Jr. and the KP trade, they would have done it?
Yeah, 100%. I think we had them over a barrel. Like, they probably should have just done it. That's an interesting one to play back. But like, well, it's also funny. Like, if Leon Rose was in that position, one, would we have even traded KP? Would the relationship ever gotten to that point? And two, like, he definitely is going to ask for fucking Jalen Brunson over Dennis Smith Jr. But like, I remember that was my main concern. I was like, look, like, he's a good regular season player. There's no doubt about that. I need to see, like, but if we were going to sign this guy to effectively be our starting point guard, which in a lot of ways caps what Quickley his role and ceiling and whatever can be with this team, I need to see him like play well in the playoffs. And he played very, very well in the playoffs. So, even if I still had reservations about it, I felt a lot better because I saw that. And like with Julius, I really don't doubt the regular season thing anymore, because I think a lot of that was resolved last season, where he didn't have a good regular season just because he was hitting shots at some like crazy clip. He was good in the regular season because his process was just a billion times better than it had been previously. But like, ultimately, if that doesn't carry over into the playoffs, then it's hard to be like, to keep continuing to keep faith in him, right? So that's really all I'm thinking about with Julius. Like, I'd be pretty surprised, honestly, if he doesn't have another really, really good regular season this next season.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just his role is simplified, and I actually think it could translate to the playoffs, right? I do think that as much as I think people who are like, take the ball out of Brunson's hands and run the offense through RJ or something, or are going a little bit further, but there probably is something to the idea that the Knicks probably could, even Randle could benefit from a little bit more ball movement and sharing the wealth and all of that. And it'll be interesting to see. I think that it is interesting though, because if you remember that Cleveland game during the regular season where Brunson had 48, you watched, like, the fact that he had a 48 wasn't what was as much interesting as how fast they played and how much the ball moved and how much of those shots were catch and shoots, right? I think the person who benefits most from the Knicks moving the ball around, honestly, is Jalen Brunson. Shot 48% on catch and shoot threes. I think part of the problem is they don't have a consistent creator. Maybe RJ can get there. I think Randle kind of is what he is. If you can throw him the ball in the post and he draws doubles, fine. But against really good teams in the playoffs, that's not something you can rely on as much. but things are like, I like, his role is a lot simpler. Like, why do you think he was bad in the playoffs? Let's put it like that.
Why do I think Julius was bad in the playoffs?
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think the people that want to give him I don't want to say pass because it makes it sound derogatory, but like, if you want to use the injury as an argument for like, hey, look, like, the guy was just in a bad spot. It is what it is. I think that's fair. Personally, I just think it just looked like he you can expose his lack of like instantaneous reads. Like, his inability to make quick reads is the thing that gets him in trouble in the playoffs. And like, again, this is also a reason why his clutch numbers, I think, have sucked even in the regular season. is that like those are the moments where defenses are a lot more attuned and heightened and are playing with like a heightened awareness and intensity. And if you're not making quick decisions or you're, over dribbling and unaware of like help defenders and all this type of stuff, that can really kill you down the stretch of a game. And in the playoffs, obviously that is ramped up for a longer portion of the game. And that stuff gets exposed. And like that's really all I think it is. Now, would if he wasn't injured, would those deficiencies have been exposed as much? Probably. I mean, definitely not. They wouldn't be because that's how this works. But we haven't seen that yet. So, is that an uncorrectable thing for him? I hope not. That would be great for me as a Knicks fan, but I wouldn't bet my life savings on it that that he's going to be able to overcome it because both the playoff stuff has been just really, really disappointing, especially given the regular seasons he was coming off of in both those instances.
Yeah, I do think the difference now is like playing off of Brunson, and this is even without like I think somebody, at least one of the out of Quinn Grimes, Immanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett, someone's going to make a leap. If you look at the work ethic of these guys, and even RJ, I know people are like he hasn't improved. He has expanded his mid-range game, not as quickly as we'd like, but it has come. There's been some weight stuff. I don't put too much on him. I don't think it was like him just not having discipline. I think he tried to gain weight and probably didn't manage it as well. It's a tough thing to do, even for professional athletes. And with Quickley, like there's no way to argue against the fact that he's gotten better each year, pretty substantially. So, but even leaving aside the idea that one of those guys could take a leap, Randall's job is really to just finish plays. Like he's got to hit open shots. It is not like when we watched that Atlanta series, it was very clear. If you ever ask this guy to do this again, like this is always what you're going to get. Atlanta wasn't even that good of a defense, right? All you got to do is shade doubles, like take away his first read, and he's in trouble. And don't let him catch the ball too deep, which they were able to manage. I don't think those are like it is possible to get him the ball deeper. And people are like, well, he had Bam on him. I honestly think he missed open threes. He was very tentative. That's like a real thing. But there was like it's not like the circumstances dictated he had to be tentative. I don't know if it was the EBGBs or whatever. The yips. That's what the word I was looking for.
EBGBs.
EBGBs. It seems to be this time. It seems very correctable. Now, is that enough? I don't like. We've talked about this. I think if he's not giving you plus defense, it's tough. You don't get like Aaron Gordon gave plus defense. Like you can't think of a team. I wrote a whole article about this. Besides like Dirk, you can't tell me a team that won a championship, and that was Dirk Nowitzki, who was pretty good at basketball. In case you have been paying attention, nobody wins with a poor defensive four for a variety of reasons, or any poor defensive big, really. I don't think Jokic is a bad defensive big, by the way. I think Jokic is,
and he's gotten a lot better, and also like he's
a better defender than Randle.
Yeah, and he's also playing at like fucking 15 billion levels above what Julius is capable of, which is not even insulting to Julius. It's just he's ridiculous.
Best player in the world.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So I think it's fair to bring those things up, but do I think he'll shoot better? Yeah, I think he'll be more efficient. I don't think it's hard for him to I think he just has to take more of the thinking away and just kind of focus on just shooting and attacking the rim, and I think he'll get there. Is that enough to offset if he doesn't improve on defense? Is it enough to offset the fact that he would be the third option, or he would be not living up to what you would exactly want from a second option? I don't know, but can he be an efficient playoff player? Absolutely, I think. I did want to ask. Did you want to answer this from Ace or?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's a good point. Randall's injured and constantly went at Mobley and Bam. We got to do a better job of not having him go at the opposing team's better.
I think
that's part of it.
Part of it was the team's best defenders that we played were power forwards, right?
Yeah, and also like it's a lot easier to get switches for guards than it is to like get the switch for a big guy to attack. And like
Another reason I think it's good for him to play quickly, though, because Quickley sets good screens. You know?
Yeah, and I just think that at the end of the day, like it is one. It says something about Randall that those guys are defending him, that they were earmarked as the primary defenders on him. Like that's that. So yes, clearly opponents are game planning for Julius Randle. But that's like the Lakers put AD on Jokic, right? The Lakers put Bam on Jokic. So everybody, the Heat put Bam on Jokic. Like everybody puts their best defenders on the opponent's best players. So it's like, is your best better than my best? I mean, and like I don't want to boil down every playoff series to just like, oh, it's just your best guys. But like you do need your best guys to be able to at least replicate production to a certain level against the best defenders and best defensive teams. And, it's unavoidable that he's going to face those guys when we go up against quality opponents. So like, I agree that there should be more that we do to disguise things offensively, but like at the end of the day, I don't know how much you can avoid those matchups for Julius. I just think he's got to be better in them.
Yeah, makes sense. Before we get out of here, I did want to ask you, since you are a movie guy and recently saw Oppenheimer, care to share with our listeners your thoughts on the movie? Were you offended by the fact that they desecrated the sacred Bhagavad Gita with nudity?
No, I was a big fan of that, actually. I actually thought some of the responses to the Florence Pugh scenes are just ridiculous. Like fucking people just need to do better.
Grow up.
Yeah,
get a life.
Yeah, it's like just Jesus Christ. I thought the movie was great. I thought it was a masterpiece. I think it's Nolan's best movie. I think it is going to be regarded, and maybe already is, as an all-time classic.
Were you a big Cillian Murphy fan before this movie?
Yeah, I like Cillian Murphy. I've watched Peaky Blinders. I think he's awesome in that. Obviously, I've seen the Batman movies. I actually kind of wish he had a bigger role in the last two, but I know why you can't. And I did like that he held court in The Dark Knight Rises. That was funny. Probably one of the more enjoyable parts of that movie. Yeah, I think I actually rewatched Dunkirk over the weekend. I thought he was awesome in that movie a strange war movie, but actually I think I liked it a lot more this time, having seen it, than I did the first time I watched. Yeah, I mean, I like Cillian Murphy. I think he's a really, really good actor. I think he's talented. And I thought this was this is kind of like his, I mean, I think everybody knows who he is, but this feels like a definite coming out party for him, at least as far as like American audiences are concerned. So yeah, I thought he was a great pick to be Oppenheimer. The movie itself was incredible. The entire cast was incredible. I thought Emily Blunt was awesome in it. I thought Florence Pugh was awesome in it. I think Robert Downey Jr. is probably going to get nominated for an Oscar. I thought obviously Matt Damon was really good at it. What's his name? The guy that played Roger, Jason Clarke. He was fucking awesome in that movie.
Like, I didn't like. It kept bothering me the whole time, and then I realized it was Jerry West from in Winning Time, and I was like, holy shit, that's it.
Yeah, but he was amazing in that movie. I just think like I've talked about this with friend of the pod, Knicks Illustrated, before, but like I think Nolan, he tries a lot of shit and he doesn't always hit all the high notes. I thought this was like this is not an original take, but I did think of this originally before I realized this was a take everybody had. But it felt like this was a movie where everything he'd been working for, like everything he'd been trying in all these different movies, like Tenet, fucking Interstellar, Inception, and then all like Inception's incredible. I love Interstellar. I think Dunkirk's really, really good. Like his filmography.
Did you like the Batman movies? Or?
I love The Dark Knight. I actually think Batman Begins is fucking awesome too. The Dark Knight Rises is like fun, but also just like, so we just love cops now. That's the message here. It's a little bit concerning about that one. But like, I just think he nailed everything. I just thought it was like, it was like his, how like, look, Steph's won 4 championships, right? But he needed the 4th one. Like he really needed that 4th one. This is like, Nolan's like made a lot of fucking awesome movies, but this was the movie I think that he needed to be more than just like, oh, he's like he has a huge following and he's a really fun director and he makes big blockbuster action movies, but like, has he made like a truly great piece? Like, has he made like a great film? And I just think this absolutely was in every way. And he got great performances from all the actors, everybody in it, which is like, a great coach getting great performances from his players. So,
I also
yeah,
think it's a subject matter which I think a lot of people have had takes like, oh, you're glorifying something
yeah,
horrifying. And I thought they took the right tone. I think it showed that like basically these are impossible, almost moral questions being put in the hands of flawed, but not completely flawed people. Like I don't think there's any real. No one's really like they don't really show Nazis, so there aren't really bad guys in the movie, right? Like I don't think Robert Downey Jr.'s character is supposed to be a straight up villain. Like he's a flawed person in many ways, doing what he thinks he's doing best. Like obviously he's crafty and like a little bit maybe unscrupulous, but I think the whole point was that like I think it took that it wasn't amoral, but I think it did a good job of showing how challenging these questions are, and that like and not glorifying the people that like these are just normal people who are flawed who were in this position, and this is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I first of all, if you watch that movie and your takeaway is like they glorified Oppenheimer, like I don't know, maybe don't watch movies, like they're not for you. But yeah, I think that they did a really good job of. I didn't think there was. I didn't even really feel like they took a strong stance on. No, he definitely didn't leak any information to the Soviets or the Russians. Like they made it very obvious that like that was ambiguous. Like it was very ambiguous how they handled all of that. He wouldn't answer the question directly. He has a conversation early in the movie with Florence Pugh's character, um, where he's talking about like, oh, like because she's like, are you a communist or are you not a communist? And he's like, look, I like to have a little wiggle room. And the entire movie is like him not taking a stance on a variety of things and like the moral dilemmas he faces that he is unable or incapable of necessarily taking hardline stances on. And then, like he leads this Manhattan Project, which creates obviously the nuclear weapon. And then like he's now probably feeling a lot of regret about it. But even in the face of that, he can't fully walk away from this because now he feels obligated to like try to prevent the future proliferation of nuclear weapons. And I just think it was a great movie. And I don't think there were easy answers that were given to you by Nolan as the director of the movie. I thought, again, the performances were really good. I did think Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Strauss, was meant to be like a villain in the sense that because what he does is unambiguously bad, right? Like
Some of
either,
the things, but it's also I think he raises some rightful concerns, right?
oh,
Like
of course, like I mean that's part of it. Like it isn't like again, it's not clear that like did he leak information to the Soviets? I don't know, but it seems pretty weird that he was like so adamant. They're like, no, he's like fucking they're 15 years behind us. And it's like, really? Are you sure? Like, they just tested a nuke. I don't think they are. And he's like, the hydrogen bomb won't work and all those type of things I think are interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. I thought that movie was honestly, it's incredible. I think it'll easily go down as Nolan's best work, which is funny, but like, I also don't know if it'll win all the awards because I anticipate that like Killers of the Flower Moon, which comes out in the fall, is going to be fucking awesome too. So should be a fun.
Did you see Barbie yet, or?
I have not seen Barbie yet. I do need to go see that. Did you?
I have not. So, and I saw I went opening night, so I could not get tickets. I sat in. I haven't seen it in 70 millimeter or IMAX, so I'm going to see Oppenheimer again. But yeah, I also.
Are you going to try to do Barbenheimer?
No, that is. I mean,
like 3 hours on its own is enough. Like my mom used to tell me when she was in India, they would do double features of
Yeah.
Bollywood movies.
So just take an
And
entire day.
I don't think I could do that when I was a kid. I definitely can't do that now. I need a nap or a little an eat ball or something in the middle to get through it.
Oh man. All right, I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Stacy Patton 89 on the app formerly known as Twitter. Nothing to plug. I'll plug the WNBA coverage we have on the Strickland right now, the Liberty, then yeah, I mean, it's the off season can be a little bit heavy, so to go out, have fun, but other than that, nothing else to plug.
Yeah, I have nothing to plug myself, so I will just plug all the work at the Strickland. Check out the pods, check out articles, all that stuff. Check out our store. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on YouTube. That would be a huge help to us. And aside from that, just want to mention that the show is brought to you again by betonline.ag. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you on Friday.